you need to get off the X. You have to stop just reading about it. You have to stop just thinking about it and actually do something. It doesn't have to be something big. You don't have to go, sink thousands of dollars into gear and all that, but do something. Practice tying knots, practice building a fire. Go to the grocery store and spend $10 on a little bit of extra food or water. Chuck those water bottles into the freezer. Things like that. Doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be something.
You're listening to DisasterClass Podcast by Instinct Ready Emergency Management. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of DisasterClass, the podcast dedicating to helping you educate, prepare, and equip yourself for life's disruptions. I'm Jason Perez, and with me today is Jason Martin, a.k.a. Pappy.
Hey, and as always, it's good to be here with you, Jason.
So today we're joined by Jim Cobb. He's a nationally recognized authority on disaster readiness and the editor-in-chief of Backwoods Survival Guide magazine. Jim has been involved in disaster readiness for about 40 years. He's written more than a dozen books, hundreds of articles, and has spent decades helping people think more practically about preparedness, survival, self-reliance, and home readiness, and long-term resilience. But what makes this conversation especially useful, it's not just Jim's resume, but it's his perspective, right? He has seen preparedness before the internet. He's seen it through books, magazines, Cold War, survivalism, Y2K, post-9/11 readiness, the rise of online forums, the explosion of social media, pandemic-era prepping, and today's world of influencers, gearless, and fear-driven content. And then after all of that, his advice is still grounded in a very simple idea that preparedness should be realistic. It should fit your life. It should help you handle disruptions. It should make you more capable, and it should not require you to lose your common sense.
And that's what I really appreciated the most about this conversation, because Jim isn't selling fantasy preparedness, which is all over the place now. He's not telling people to run off into the woods and spend thousands of dollars before they even know what the problem is that they're trying to solve. What he's doing is he's bringing preparedness back to real life. The basics: water, food, money, skills, communication, family, neighbors. And with that, the ability to take practical action before life gets disrupted.
So before preparedness became a content category, before social media groups and survival influencers, before gear review channels and endless online checklists, Jim Cobb's interests started in a much simpler place.
Well, I grew up very rural and spent every waking moment out in the woods, building forts and, having that kind of fun. And I was really interested in wilderness survival back then. I got every book I could find at the library. I'd read them cover to cover over and over and over, and then go out to the woods and try to implement some of the things that I was learning, building traps and snares and, all that kind of stuff, tracking game. And I had a lot of fun with that. This is 40, 50 years. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have all the stuff that kids have today. This was making our own fun,
So there's something important in that origin story. Jim did not start with fear. He started with curiosity. He read, he experimented, he tried things, he learned by doing. And that pattern shows up throughout the entire conversation that we had, right? Real preparedness is not just information consumption. It's not just buying supplies. It's not just imagining scenarios. It's learning, practicing, adjusting, and building useful capability over time. But Jim's path did not stop with wilderness survival. As he got older, the world around him changed. The Cold War shaped the public imagination. Nuclear war was part of the cultural conversation. Post-apocalyptic fiction became popular, and Jim's interests expanded from woods into broader survival planning.
And keep in mind, this was at the height of the Cold War. Okay, this is the 80s by this point, and everybody's talking about nuclear war. And, you know, the Russians are going to launch on us any moment now. So I started getting interested in what we call post-apocalyptic fiction. Like the Survivalist series by Jerry and Sharon Ahern, The Last Ranger, Traveler, all these different titles that were out at the time. And I was just fascinated by these things. I love reading these stories. And that kind of pushed me into a different area of survival planning, where I had been focused on the wilderness angle. Well, now I'm looking at, you know, food stockpiling and preservation and weaponry and, you know, all these kind of things. And between these two elements that kind of set me on the path that I'm still on today, 40 years later, I'm still reading about these things. I still love a good post-apocalyptic story. I still love going and playing in the woods, you know, with my kids and my granddaughter now. And I'm still interested in preparedness. I'm having a lot of fun with it.
And that's a good reminder that preparedness has always been influenced by the era that people are living in. For one generation, it may have been the Cold War. For another, it was hurricanes, terrorism, pandemics, wildfires, supply chain disruptions, cyber incidents, or civil unrest. And so the scenario is constantly changing. The cultural language is changing, but the human question stays very similar. What happens when the systems we depend on each and every day, what happens when they're interrupted?
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the most important points that Jim made early in the conversation. Preparedness looks different than it did 40 years ago, but the fundamentals are not as different as people think. When Pappy asked Jim how preparedness has changed over the last 40 years, Jim's answer was direct. It has changed, but it has not changed.
The more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Yes, preparedness looks a lot different now, but the focus is still the same. We're still talking about the same things we were 40 years ago. We're still talking about how do we preserve water? How do we preserve food? How do we clean water? How do we, handle a medical crisis? It's the approach that's changed. Technology has gotten better. Honestly, one of the biggest changes, I think, in the last 40 years has been with the networking aspect of preparedness and the ease with which you're able to connect with people today compared to 40 years ago.
So that phrase matters. The approach has changed. Today, we can access information instantly. We can compare products, download checklists, watch tutorials, join preparedness communities, take online training, and share ideas with people around the country or even around the world. And that is a major advantage. But it also creates a new challenge because more information does not automatically mean better preparedness.
No, it doesn't. So what Jim also pointed out in his comments was that preparedness has become more mainstream. And really, that's a good thing because people are more willing to talk about having food, water, emergency supplies, and family plans. But the stereotypes are still out there. Sometimes those stereotypes are unfair, though. And sometimes, as Jim said, preparedness culture creates some of its own problems.
The stigma of prepping has changed in the last 40 years. It's become a lot more mainstream today than it's ever been before. Yeah, there's still there's still a little bit of stereotyping when it comes to survivalism and things like that. But we're also our own worst enemy in that regard. Every community has a very vocal minority that might not make everybody else look the best. Okay. And we definitely have that in the preparedness culture. I don't know why, but it is what it is. And it's those outliers, those vocal minority that tend to encourage that the stereotypes and the stigma and all that. And it makes my job so much more harder, so much more difficult, but at the end of the day, I think prepping in general is in a much better position today than it's ever been. And hopefully that continues to improve.
And so that is an important distinction for DisasterClass. Preparedness should not be fringe. Readiness should not be embarrassing. Having food, water, medical supplies, financial reserves, a family communication plan, and basic skills should be normal. The problem is not preparedness. The problem is when preparedness becomes performative, fear-driven, or disconnected from reality. And that issue has become more complicated in the age of social media. One of the biggest changes Jim has seen is the shift from books and magazines and in-person learning to internet-driven preparedness. And that shift has created enormous benefits, right? People can find information faster than ever before. But there is a downside. Bad information is also faster than ever before.
It's a double-edged sword. I think our accessibility to great information is better than it's ever been before. But at the same time, the accessibility of bad information is also there. And it can be hard, especially for somebody who's brand new to prepping. It can be very hard for them to discern the good from the bad. There's all kinds of myths when it comes to prepping, right? Wasp spray instead of pepper spray, heating your house with tea lights, all these different things. Then they get passed around on social media so quickly, and it becomes very easy for you to fall into this trap of, I saw 17 different people post about this, so it's got to be true. Well, all 17 of those people can be wrong.
Jason, that line is worth remembering. All 17 people can be wrong. And let's face it, a lot of preparedness misinformation spreads because it sounds simple. It's easy to do. It's clever or sounds clever. It sounds like the kind of thing people want to pass along because it feels helpful. But really, in an emergency, bad advice, it can create real danger.
And Jim gave a very specific example.
For a few years now, there's been this story that cycles social media where if you get lost in the woods, you should take out your phone and you should change your outgoing voicemail message to reflect where you are and that you're lost, so that if somebody happens to call you and they get your voicemail, they'll know that you're in trouble and they can call somebody for help. And it's nonsense. You have to have a cell signal to change your outgoing message. If you have a cell signal, call for help.
Right.
Don't rely on somebody who's trying to sell you an extended warranty on your car to actually listen to your voicemail message and then do something about it.
Preparedness has to be tested against reality. Does the advice actually work? Does this plan depend on something that may fail? Does this tool solve the actual problem? Have I practiced this? Have I verified this? Could this create a false sense of security? And that is the difference between collecting preparedness ideas and tools and becoming prepared.
Jason, that's where we really start to see the heart of Jim's message. The issue is not that people need more fear. They've got enough. It is not that people need a longer list of gear. It's that they need a practical starting point. And Jim's first recommendation may surprise some of our listeners.
One of the first things I recommend to people is and this sounds kind of backwards, but work on your financial situation. Work on reducing debt, establishing an emergency savings account, things of that nature. And I say this because once you're able to get that under control, everything else in your life gets so much easier. When you're experiencing financial trouble, everything is a hurdle. Everything is a crisis. If, let's say, you're in a position where if your car breaks down and it's going to cost you $500 to fix that car, and if you don't fix that car, you're going to lose your job, and that $500 expense is going to send your entire world into a tailspin, that needs to change. And I cast no blame nor shame for people who are in financial trouble. The economy right now is brutal for just about everybody, myself included. But you need to take steps to improve that situation.
And you know, that is one of the most grounded preparedness answers you will ever hear. Because for most people, the most likely emergencies are not cinematic. They're not always this massive disaster, right? Sometimes the emergency is a car repair, a lost job, a medical bill, a power outage, a delayed paycheck, a storm that shuts things down for a few days, a family situation that disrupts your normal routine.
And this is where real preparedness becomes very, very practical. If a $500 expense can destabilize everything in your life, then building financial margin that's preparedness. If a 3-day power outage leaves you with no water plan, then storing water is preparedness. If your family doesn't know where to go during an evacuation, then having that conversation is preparedness. It doesn't have to look dramatic to matter.
And after financial preparedness, Jim moved immediately to one of the most basic and most important survival needs.
One of the most critical elements of survival is water. So we need to figure out what you're going to do for clean water if it's not running from the tap. Okay? Beautiful real world example. The town next to mine went through this last year where one of the water mains broke and local residents had no access to clean water for several days. Now, the municipality started bringing in bottled water, and you could go to their truck and, get a case of water a day or whatever it was. But at the same time, that's not a lot of water. One case of bottled water isn't much. You need to have a solution already in advance for what you're going to do for clean water in a crisis. And that can be having some amount of water stored, as well as the means to process, filter, and purify additional water that you're able to source outside the home, such as, rainwater or lake water or whatever the case is.
So that is not an abstract scenario. Water main breaks happen all the time. Boil water advisories happen all the time. Power outages affect us all the time. Flooding can contaminate water. Municipal systems can be interrupted. And even when public officials or emergency services respond quickly, the amount of water you receive may not be enough to cover all of your household needs. So Jim offered one of the simplest preparedness tips in the entire episode.
One of the easiest preps when it comes to water is take water bottles and chuck them in your freezer. Okay? Fill up the nooks and crannies in your freezer. This does a few things. Number one, a full freezer works far more efficiently than one that's half empty. Number two, in a power outage, all of those frozen bottles are going to help preserve your food longer until the power comes back on. And number three, you can pull those bottles out, let them thaw as a source for clean water in a crisis. And the bonus is it doesn't take up any more real estate in your home. You've already got this appliance there. All you're doing is filling up the little spaces inside it.
And that's the kind of preparedness that we love here on Disaster Class. 1, it's simple. 2, it's affordable. 3, it's useful information. And 4, it solves more than one problem. And that's what I loved about it the most.
Exactly. And that leads directly into Jim's definition of real-world preparedness.
Real-world preparedness to me is being able to tackle life's little and not so little curveballs. It's not focused on the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it really isn't. There's a school of thought out there that says, if I'm prepared to handle the end of the world, I'm prepared to handle anything else that might fall short of that. And that's valid, but only on a surface level, because the strategies are a lot different. If you look at how you're going to handle a week-long power outage, how you're going to handle job loss, and how you're going to handle the zombie apocalypse, okay? These are all very different strategies, okay? And they're not necessarily going to play nicely with one another. You have to have different plans for different scenarios.
And so that is a key lesson. Preparedness is not one plan. It is a set of capabilities. The plan for job loss is not the same as the plan for a power outage. The plan for a winter storm is not the same as a plan for evacuation. And the plan for sheltering in place is not the same as a plan for leaving your home. And if your entire preparedness strategy depends on one dramatic scenario, you may be less prepared for the disruptions that are far more likely to affect your life. And so we keep talking about this idea of practical preparedness. And at Instinct Ready, we help organizations move from good intentions to that practical readiness. That includes an emergency operations plan, a business continuity plan, tabletop exercises, training programs, ready assessments, and preparedness consulting designed around how your organization actually operates. Because emergency management is not just about having a binder on a shelf. It is about building real capability before disruption happens. And so if your organization needs help assessing its readiness, developing a plan, or validating a plan through an exercise, go visit instinctready.com. One of the strongest parts of this interview came when Jim talked about realistic planning.
Let's say, for the sake of argument, your plan in the event of a major catastrophe, you're going to strap on your trusty bug out bag and you're going to hoof it 150 miles to your cabin up north. Okay. If you get winded walking to your mailbox, you're not going to make it 150 miles on foot. But yet over and over and over and over, I see people with this sort of plan who are in absolutely no physical condition to handle it.
Right.
I'm not saying that if you can't handle a 150 mile hike, you should give up. What I'm saying is you need to come up with a different approach. One that's realistic and that takes into account your skill set as well as your deficits.
And that's an uncomfortable but necessary point. Preparedness has to be honest for everybody involved. If your plan depends on physical ability that you don't have, money that you don't have, supplies that you haven't stored up, or transportation that you don't have arranged, or even skills that you haven't practiced, then it's not a plan, it's an idea.
And ideas are not bad, right? Every plan starts with an idea, but eventually you have to pressure test it. Could I actually do this? Could my family do this? Could we do this in bad weather? Could we do this at night? Could we do this if someone was sick, injured, elderly, disabled, or scared? Could we do this if the roads were congested? Could we do this if cell phones were down? That is where real planning begins. And Jim gave one of the clearest evacuation frameworks we have heard on the show.
With emergency evacuation, there are 3 elements that you need to be able to satisfy: where you're going, how you're getting there, and what you're bringing. And if one of those is off, the whole thing starts to collapse. And this isn't hard. in a general sense, this isn't like rocket science. This isn't, where are you going to go? Okay. Do you have a friend or relative who lives within an easy drive of where you are?
Yeah.
That's step number one. How do you get there? If you don't have a family vehicle to use, you're going to have to arrange some sort of transportation. You're probably not going to be able to take a bus, okay? But hopefully you have a friend, a coworker, a relative, somebody who can get you from point A to point B. Yeah. And what are you bringing? You're bringing your bug out bag. You're not running off to the woods Red Dawn style, okay? Yeah. You're going on a weekend trip. Pack accordingly.
Exactly.
So your evacuation planning should reflect the most likely reality, not just the most dramatic possibility.
And that connects to another mistake that Jim said that he sees beginners making. It's believing that they can simply buy their way into preparedness.
Believing you can just throw money at the problem is probably one of the biggest ones. On Facebook, I'm in several different preparedness groups on Facebook. And one of the most common posts is some variation of, hey, I'm just getting started with prepping. Does anybody have a checklist, all the things that I should buy?
It doesn't work.
Yes, there is some financial involvement with preparedness, but it needs to be coupled with learning skills and, educating yourself about various things. You're not just going to spend a ton of money and then call it a day and say, okay, I'm good to go. It just doesn't work like that.
So that's worth repeating. Gear is not bad. Supplies are not bad. Preparedness products are not bad. But gear without knowledge is fragile. Supplies without a plan are limited, and a checklist without practice is incomplete.
Yeah, so then Jim helped by identifying the opposite problem. People who consume preparedness information endlessly, but they never act on it.
The other big one, and we kind of talked a little bit about this earlier, analysis paralysis, where they spend weeks reading all these books and magazine articles and watching all these videos and all that, but they never actually do anything. Okay. I'm a writer. I've been a professional writer for a long time now. And one of the very common things I see in the writing world are people who will say, I'm going to write a book. I'm taking all kinds of notes, and I've got my outline, and I'm going to write this book, and it's going to be a really good book, and I'm going to do this book, and then I'm going to do this book, and then I've got this whole series planned, and on and on. They're constantly talking about writing, but they're never actually writing. And it's the same with prepping. People love to talk about prepping, but they don't actually do it. And that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Yeah. You need to get off the X and actually take that step one, take step two, take step three, and eventually you'll find yourself halfway down the path.
And so that is one of the central messages of this episode. Don't wait until you know everything. Don't wait until you can buy everything or that your plan is perfect. Start with one useful action. A lot of preparedness conversations focus on the individual household. What do I have? What does my family need? What is in my pantry? What is in my bag? What's in my plan? And those are important questions. But disasters do not only affect individuals. They affect neighborhoods, businesses, schools, houses of worship, long-term care facilities, communities, and entire regions. And so we asked Jim about neighbor-to-neighbor support.
I think it's very important, and I think one of the downsides to social media is, the upside is we can meet like-minded people, but the downside is we've become very insular and we don't want to interact with real people. We would much rather go screen to screen rather than face to face. One of the things that I'm doing locally is I've partnered with my local county emergency management team. And we've been putting on monthly classes for the community. Everything from basic preparedness to pet first aid and stop the bleed and all that kind of stuff. And the ultimate goal is twofold. Number one, we want to provide the education for people, get them learning some of these skills. But on top of that, what I kind of wanted to see happen is a little bit of networking between people who are attending these classes, whether they're attending remotely or in person. And I'm starting to see a little bit of it, and we're only 4 months in, 5 months in, so got to take it slow. But I think it's really important for people to connect with one another.
And so that is a powerful model. Education plus connection. Skills plus relationships. Preparedness is stronger when people know something and know someone. A family that has supplies is better off than family with no supplies. But a neighborhood where people know each other, share skills, check on each other, and communicate during disruption is stronger than a set of isolated households.
That brought into play Jim addressing another tension in preparedness culture, and that's OPSEC, or operational security. Now, he highlighted there's valid reasons to not advertise every supply you own or every plan that you have. But then he pushed back against the idea that preparedness requires isolation.
In the prepper world, there's this whole OPSEC angle where you don't want to tell anybody that you're a prepper because then the people are going to come steal all your stuff. Okay, I mean, that is kind of a valid concern, but at the same time, human beings are pack animals. Okay, we're designed to rely on one another. And yes, the lone wolf exists, but they're very few and far between, in terms of really being able to pull it off. Okay, I mean, even the vaunted mountain men of the Old West used to come to town.
And so that is an important correction. Preparedness does not mean telling everyone what you have, but it also does not mean cutting yourself off from everyone around you. In fact, there is a middle ground. Build relationships, practice skills, know your neighbors, support local training, and connect with emergency management when possible. But do it thoughtfully, do it responsibly, and do not confuse secrecy with resilience.
Then you don't have to give people a guided tour of your preps. Okay, you're not inviting people to your home to show off your pantry. But there's nothing wrong with getting together with people once a month or once every other month to practice some skills, to just jaw with one another, and make some friendships. There's nothing wrong with that.
And that's what I really liked about it, because with everything that Jim shared, it was practical, balanced advice. You don't have to overshare. You don't have to make preparedness your whole personality either. But building trust before a crisis matters.
And Jim took that point even further, because in a crisis, the line between prepper and non-prepper disappears very quickly. When the power is out, everyone is dealing with the same outage. When water's not available, everyone needs water. And when evacuation orders are issued, everyone has to make decisions. When the disruption hits, everyone is in it.
If a crisis hits, everybody in the neighborhood is suddenly a survivalist.
Yeah.
Okay. We're all preppers at that point, whether you wanted to be or not. And I don't agree with this thought of just thumbing my nose at the people who didn't prepare.
Right.
It's just, I don't like that.
Yeah.
We're all in this together. We all bring something to the table.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody doesn't want to actively prepare for whatever reason, that's on them. But if they're drowning, I'm not going to just shove their head in the water because, they made fun of me once because I was a prepper.
Right.
I don't operate like that.
So that may be the moral center of this episode. Preparedness should not make us contemptuous. It should not make us arrogant, not to make us eager to say, I told you so, right? Preparedness should make us more useful, more capable, more steady, more ready to help. And that is the difference between fear-driven prepping and community-minded readiness. When people think about preparedness skills, they often think about hard skills: starting a fire, filtering water, using a radio, preserving food, building a shelter, providing first aid kit, things like that. And those skills matter. But Jim said one of the most overlooked preparedness skills are not the ones that look dramatic on camera.
I think one of the skill sets I would love to see more people pursue are soft skills, like communication, interpersonal communication, conflict resolution, things of that nature, where the focus isn't just on accomplishing a goal. Like when we look at hard skills versus soft skills, hard skills are generally you're accomplishing a goal, you're starting a fire, you are preparing food, you are preserving food, things like that. Soft skills are a little more nuanced, they're a little more subtle. You're building relationships, you're interacting with people. And a lot of those soft skills are very important in a crisis, as well as when you're not in a crisis, and preventing a crisis.
And that's something we talk a lot about in emergency management, even if we use a different language, because plans matter, training matters, equipment matters, but communication failures are often what turn a problem into a bigger problem, a mountain, not a molehill. A family can have supplies and still struggle if no one knows the plan. A team can have equipment and still fail if communication breaks down. A neighborhood can have people willing to help, but still become chaotic if there's no trust, no clarity, and no shared understanding.
And Jim connected that directly to conflict. In daily life, miscommunication creates arguments. In a crisis, miscommunication can create delay, confusion, fear, and unnecessary conflict.
Think about it like this. The vast majority of arguments that you have with people on a daily basis happen because of miscommunication more than anything else. You said X, they heard Y, and neither one of you can agree on Z. Okay?
Yep.
If you work on those communication skills and become more adept at saying what you're actually trying to say, it eliminates a lot of that commotion, a lot of that static. And in a crisis, you want to eliminate as much static as possible. You want people to respond in a positive manner to things that you're saying or doing. And that's what's going to get you there.
That phrase, eliminate the static, is very useful because fear creates static. Unclear roles create static. Unspoken assumptions create static. Contradictory information creates static. Unpracticed plans create static. Good communication, however, reduces static. And that applies whether you're managing a household emergency plan, a workplace disruption, an evacuation, a shelter-in-place event, or a larger community incident.
Jim shared that soft skill that he thought was really important, but we also asked him about hard skills. And one of the biggest ones was physical capability. And it's not because everyone needs to become an elite athlete. I'm not going to, I know that. But because your plan has to match what your body can actually do.
I think physical fitness is big. It's an area that's ripe for improvement for a lot of people. We talked about this before. If you're planning to evacuate on foot and you can't walk, you're not going to get very far. And I'll admit, I am just as lacking in fitness as the next guy, okay? I have a desk job, and that makes it a lot harder for me to keep up with what I used to,
Yep.
I'm working on it. I'm taking steps in the right direction.
Yeah.
That humility is important. The point is not shame, The point is alignment. Your preparedness plans has to fit actual capabilities. And if there is a gap between the plan and your capability, well, you have two options. Adjust the plan, improve the capability, or ideally do both.
I think another one for hard skills is dealing with adversity, and that's a big umbrella, okay? But being able to go without air conditioning, being able to deal with the heat, or conversely in the winter, deal with the cold. And accept that life's going to suck for a little while. It'll get better, but you need to get over this hump. And that can be difficult for a lot of people, especially who aren't used to handling it.
And that is another mature preparedness point. Preparedness is not only about what you own, it is about what you can tolerate. Discomfort, delay, heat, cold, boredom, stress, uncertainty, a disruption to your routine. Those are not glamorous topics, but in real emergencies, they matter. After decades of writing books, articles, newsletters, and magazine content, Jim is still teaching preparedness. So Pappy asked him what keeps him going.
I'm still writing stuff like that because it's still fun. I learn something new every day, and I love being able to share that knowledge with readers. And when it comes to like editing the magazines, I have the best job in the world because I get to read all of these great articles that people send me before anybody else does. Yeah. And that's really kind of cool. Backwoods Survival Guide magazine comes out 4 times a year. It's available, or should be available, anywhere magazines are sold.
Jason, his answer really stood out to me because after all these years, 40 plus years, Jim is still learning. So that's a good lesson for preparedness. Nobody knows everything. Nobody's mastered every skill. Nobody has a perfect plan. Preparedness is a learning process.
Jim also talked about where listeners can start if they want to explore his work.
If somebody wants an introduction to my books, I recommend either Prepper's Long-Term Survival Guide, Countdown to Preparedness, or the Urban Prepper's Guide. Those are my personal top 3. Prepper's Home Defense is crowding the top 3. It's right up there. The new book that I have coming out later this summer is Common Sense Everyday Carry, which is a little bit of a departure from the pure prepping information I've been doing, but it's still in that same umbrella because I think EDC, or Everyday Carry, is that's a foundation of preparedness. And I was really excited to have an opportunity to tackle that one. I've been wanting to do that book for a while. All of my books you can find at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, anywhere that sells books either carries them or can order them.
So Jim also said that you can follow him on Facebook, where he's most actively. You can search for Jim Cobb or Real World Prepping, but he's also on the other major social media platforms as well. But whatever you do, whether you read one of his books or look at some of his work, the final message is the same. Preparedness becomes real when you act. The strongest lesson from this conversation is that preparedness does not need to be extreme to be meaningful. You don't have to become a different person overnight. You don't have to build the perfect kit. You don't have to memorize every scenario or spend thousands of dollars on gear. Preparedness starts with the life you actually live, with the life you actually have, your family, your home, your budget, your health, your neighborhood, your likely hazards, your daily routines, your actual capabilities. And then it asks one simple question: what can I do now to become more capable when that disruption happens?
So That could be some simple things. It could be as simple as putting water bottles in the freezer. It could mean building an emergency savings account or making copies of important documents. It could mean learning stop the bleed or checking on a neighbor. It could mean practicing communication with your family or walking a little bit more often so your evacuation plan is more realistic and you're physically able to do it. And it could mean finally taking that first step that you've been putting off.
Jim Cobb's message is not complicated. Stop only reading, stop only thinking, stop only talking. Do something. Small actions matter. And over time, small actions compound into real readiness. Preparedness is not paranoia. It is capability. And capability is built one practical step at a time. Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of Disaster Class. Please remember to like, subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone else who needs to hear it. To learn more about emergency preparedness training, planning, and consulting services, visit InstinctReady.com. Disaster Class is brought to you by Instinct Ready Emergency Management and is directed, edited, and produced by Jason Perez. Copyright 2026, Instinct Ready Incorporated, all rights reserved.